They think evil is born in shadows, that it hides, waits, stalks. They're wrong. Evil doesn't hide. It observes. It learns your shape, your warmth, the rhythm of your breath when you believe you're safe. I've watched them all. The ones who kill for love, for silence, for art, for control. They called them monsters. But monsters are stories you tell children to make the world seem simple. These ones were real, made of routines, of jobs, of smiles. They walked your streets, held doors open, paid taxes, waved to neighbors. Each left behind a fragment of truth, and I gathered them. 10 voices, 10 confessions, 10 perfect stillnesses. I wrote their names into the dark so they would never be forgotten. And now I open the archive. Listen carefully. This is not fiction. This is memory. This is what humanity sounds like when the mask finally stops breathing. People think death is quiet. They've never listened properly. I don't look for screams. Screams are wasteful, too loud, too brief. I wait for what comes after, when sound begins to understand it's running out of time. That's the moment I collect. I used to work in sound repair. Headphones, microphones, old cassette decks, machines that remembered voices. I liked fixing them. Every broken wire was a whisper waiting to be untangled. But people stopped caring about sound. They traded depth for convenience. No one listens anymore. So I found new things to listen to. It began simple. Recording voices in the street, arguments, laughter, the way people talk when they think no one's paying attention. There's honesty in unguarded tones. You can hear everything: age, fear, loneliness, in the shape of a single syllable. One night, I played back a recording from a park bench. A woman was crying, not sobbing, not breaking down, just crying, soft, rhythmic. And then she gasped, that gasp. It was perfect, sharp at the start, then fading like a note cut by silence. I listened to it again and again. It didn't belong to grief anymore. It belonged to me. That's when I understood. The purest sound in the world is the moment between fear and acceptance. I began searching for it, not by accident, by design. I learned which voices trembled easily, which ones carried cracks you could widen with kindness. Bars, bus stops, quiet corners, places where loneliness wears cheap perfume. I would start with a question. Are you okay? No one ever says no to that. They talk. They always talk. The first recording I made deliberately was in a car by the river. She was telling me about her childhood. I was nodding, watching the reflection of her mouth move in the window. She had a beautiful laugh, thin and nervous. It fluttered between words, never landing long enough to rest. When I placed the recorder on the dashboard, she didn't ask why. People trust devices more than people. I told her I wanted to capture truth. She believed me. There's a point where every story turns, where honesty begins to sound like begging. You can hear it if you know what to listen for. The pitch rises, the air gets heavier, and every vowel becomes a plea. That's when I reach out, not to comfort, just to steady the microphone. What happens next isn't complicated. It's a gradual fading of voices, a duet of breath and resistance. I don't rush. Music doesn't like to be forced. I wait until the room holds its breath with me. When silence finally arrives, I press stop. Afterward, I sit in the dark and play the recording back once. Only once. More would be indulgence. I'm not here for indulgence. I'm here for sound. Each recording is unique. Some end with a sigh, some with a single word, some with a noise you can't name, like a door closing somewhere far away. I keep them on tapes, labeled only by date. No names. Names distort. Dates tell the truth. I file them in drawers, stacked neatly beside old headphones and cables. From outside, it looks like an archive of forgotten music. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I listen to the older tapes. The hiss between breaths calms me. That hiss is life evaporating in real time. It's the sound of the world emptying itself of meaning. You think this is cruelty? It isn't. Cruelty is messy. This is precision. I give every voice the same ending, one that doesn't break, one that simply dissolves. There was one man I still remember. He talked about oceans, said he liked the sound of waves because it reminded him of breathing. He was right. The sea is just the world inhaling and exhaling. When I listened to his final moments, it sounded like tide receding. He gave me the ocean and I gave him silence. They'll never find the tapes. I built a false wall behind the storage unit, soundproofed it. A room made of quiet. Each cassette rests there, spines facing outward like books that don't want to be read. People imagine guilt sounds loud. Mine doesn't. It hums at the edge of hearing, a tone that only I can find. I still work with audio sometimes. Police hire me to clean background noise from recordings, to isolate voices. They don't know I recognize some of them, my own work. I take their evidence, remove the clutter, and give it back to them pure. They thank me for my help. They say I have an ear for detail. They're right. When I leave the station, I pass a vending machine in the hall. It hums at exactly the same pitch as that first gasp in the park. I always stop for a second, just to hear it. People walk by, phones in their ears, talking too loud, filling the air with waste. They don't notice the music in their noise. They don't know how precious the last note of fear can be. I know. I've captured hundreds of them. And somewhere, behind the false wall, in the room built for quiet, those voices still breathe for me. Not loud, not begging, just endless whispers fading into each other. A choir of endings, forever replaying the moment where fear learned how to sing. I never kept the bodies. I kept what they left behind. Not hair, not skin, not anything a newspaper would dress in big words. Small things, things that listened. A ring that clicked against bone when a hand trembled. A button that popped free when a chest forgot to breathe. A ribbon that learned a pulse and then unlearned it. I kept those. I was ordinary in daylight, a face that remembered to nod, to hold doors, to count change without shaking. No one suspects a man who knows how to wait. Waiting was the first room. I learned the rhythms of certain streets, the way people carry themselves when they are almost home, keys already in hand, shoulders already softer. I did not choose everyone. I chose those the world had taught to apologize for existing. Eyes lowered, names mumbled, lives that could be misplaced without the city breaking stride. I learned their roots the way a gardener learns seasons. No hurry, no harvest before its time. This is what I did. Plainly, I followed long enough to know when routine would make them deaf to their own caution. I spoke just enough to be allowed inside the circle of arm's length. I removed the distance between us. There are moments in every room when air changes weight, the decision settles, pleading begins its looping, hands search pockets for old beliefs, phones, prayers, keys that will not open anything. I did not rush that moment. I let it ripen. Then I ended it. I will not teach you how. That is not why I am speaking. Know this instead. There is a quiet that arrives after struggle. It is not merciful. It is merely complete. After quiet came the choosing. I never tore the world apart looking for trophies. Trophies are noisy. I took what already wanted to go, a ring loosened by thin fingers, a watch unbuckled in panic, a photograph that fell from a wallet, a scarf left warm with the idea of a throat. I wrapped each object in clean cloth, wrote a date in steady ink, and took it home. Home was a house with a back room. No one visited. A single lamp, plain shelves, space between items so nothing felt crowded. I spoke to them without words. Objects do not need sentences. They remember without language. You asked for clarity. Here it is. I killed. Not once, not twice. Enough times to know what fear sounds like when it realizes there will be no more mornings. I chose those the city had prepared for me. The overlooked, the late, the too tired to make noise. I touched them until movement stopped being a choice. I watched their eyes become rooms with the lights off. I kept one thing from each, and I labeled it. The first was the ring, winter metal, thin as a promise you whisper to yourself to feel brave. She talked fast. People talk fast when they want to outrun a night. Words tripped, breath shortened. Her hand lifted. The ring kissed bone, a soft bell. When the quiet arrived, I slid the ring free. It came easy, as if it had been waiting. The next was a button, cheap plastic, pearled to pretend wealth. It flew when a chest heaved for air that would not return. It bounced once, twice, then lay as if it had chosen that square of floor. I knew its place on my shelf before I picked it up. A photograph came later, edges worn, a smile fogged from too much handling. He pushed it at me as if a stranger's face could negotiate with finality. When his hand slackened, the picture slid down to my shoe. I stepped aside. I do not step on the past, I collect it. A watch with a cracked face. Time limped by 1 second. That second was braver than the others. It kept moving when they stopped. A scarf. Cheap wool. Perfume that mistook itself for safety. It held shape like a memory holds warmth long after the body cools. You want to know how it felt? It felt like sorting, like making a drawer that finally closes, like lining up the world until it stops rattling. Panic is messy. Begging tangles. I learned not to argue with it. I learned to wait until it untied itself. Some tried to buy time with stories. Childhoods were offered, illnesses, faith. I let the inventory pass. None of it was currency in the room we were in. I kept my hand steady. I kept my breath ordinary. I made sure the last thing they saw wasn't hatred. Hatred is a mirror. It shows you your own face. I preferred them to see nothing. Back home, I would sit with the lamp on and write the date, never the names. Names rot first. Dates harden. They keep shape. I opened the cloth carefully, felt the weight, listened to the object remember what my hands already knew. I placed it where it belonged. The room accepted it. Shelves are honest. They do not pretend to be anything but endings. I slept well those nights. Quiet is good bedding. When they came for me, it was a weekday that wore rain like work clothes. Their shoes squeaked purpose on my floors. They touched my drawers as if the wood were complicit. They found the room. The lamp did what lamps do. It showed. They were angrier at the neatness than at the death. They wanted rage to blame. Order unsettles them. What is this? One asked. A record, I said. He wanted more. He wanted a speech. I will never give it. They wrapped my objects in paper that crackled like late leaves. They smudged my dates with thumbs. They pretended the smudges were victories. I did not help. Helping is a kind of ownership. I do not share what I made. Prison is a corridor of recycled air. The window here turns the yard into a dull postcard. The days file past, heads down. I do not count them. I count only the spaces on a shelf I no longer see. There was one space left, a palm's width between the watch and the scarf. I kept it empty on purpose. Emptiness has its own weight. I do not know if it was waiting for another object or for the idea that I could stop. Stopping is also a collection. You gather all your want into a small box and close it. This is not contrition. Contrition speaks loudly so the world can applaud. This is inventory. What did I do? I chose. I ended. I kept. I catalogued fear in things small enough to forget themselves. I made a place where the last seconds of many lives stood still without screaming. I did not keep the bodies. Bodies demand weather. They rot. They insist. They argue with time. I kept what remembered without argument. When I hold the ring in my mind, it clicks once. Bone, bell, hush. The button settles. The watch limps on, braver than clocks. The photograph warms as if the smile inside it were a coal. The scarf refuses to become winter. You wanted to know what I did? Now you do. It is not a riddle. It is not poetry pretending to be smoke. It is a room, a lamp, a list of dates, and the quiet that arrives after a stranger stops moving. That quiet is what I kept. That quiet is what kept me. If there is any horror left to carry out of here, it is this. I did not learn the silence. It learned me. And there are more objects in the world than there are eyes willing to see who they once touched. I never kept the bodies. I kept what they left behind. It was enough. I stopped offering rides when I learned doors say yes without words. The van was ordinary, white, old enough to be ignored, smelled of oil Coffee and a winter that never left. Seats cracked. Floor rubber scuffed smooth by years of errands that had nothing to do with me. Ordinary is a key. It opens everything. I drove slow, learned the rhythms of late streets. How parking lots breathe after midnight. How people shrink inside their coats when the cold leans in. I did not choose everyone. I chose those the city trained to apologize. Eyes down, shoulders in, a hurry that makes them deaf to danger. This is what I did, plainly. I watched first. 2 nights, sometimes 3. I learned the route from the graveyard shift to the bus stop, the habit of cutting across the empty car wash, the way a person hesitates under a broken light as if waiting for it to remember how to shine. I parked where shadows stack. Far edge. No cameras that matter. Engine idling soft. Heater ticking like a small animal in sleep. The side door was the point. Sliding, not hinged. It didn't creak. I kept it that way. Sound is everything. When the street thinned and the last safe pair of footsteps faded, I moved. 10 meters out, rolling like a yawn. Close enough for my voice to arrive warm, far enough not to frighten them until I wanted fear. Need a minute? I would ask. Not a ride, not a promise. Just a minute to be inside warmth instead of wind. People step toward comfort. It isn't trust. It's weather. They leaned to the open window. I kept both hands visible, fingers loose on the wheel, face arranged into something that could be forgotten later. Not everyone came close. Those who didn't, I let go. No chasing. Chasing leaves marks. Those who did, I watched for the moment when their breath fogged the glass and their shoulders lowered a half inch. That was yes. The door slid open. They climbed in. The world outside shut like a book. Inside, the noise changed. Rain became thuds. Streetlights became honey smears. The heater turned their shiver into a small story they stopped reading. I did not lock the door immediately. Locks announced themselves. I moved the van first, a smooth pull, tires whispering along paint-wet asphalt, turn signal slow as a heartbeat. They spoke. Work. Buses. How late it was. How kind this was. Gratitude is a lullaby. It rocks people past the guardrail. I guided us into the service lane behind the grocery closed for remodel. The signs said no entry. Signs only talk to people who obey them. There is always a minute where the body senses something the mind won't name. Eyes flick to the door handle, down to the phone, back to me. I let that minute grow. Then I pared it down to silence. I will not teach methods. Understand only this. Movement ended the way a song ends. Not with a crash, but with the last note hanging in the air until it forgets it was sound. When stillness arrived, I worked quickly. Windows, fog record everything. I wiped them with old towels that smelled of sun that never touched them. I removed what did not belong. Bags, scarves, the evidence of a day that had already ended. I placed a single thing aside, the thing I would keep, and returned the rest to pockets that no longer needed them. Panic has a voice. It speaks in elbows, shoes, teeth. It tries to write its name on the walls. I did not let it write. The van absorbed what happened. Rubber floors do that. So do men who don't flinch. I drove again. Different streets, different cameras. The city is a map of blind spots if you learn it properly. I will not say where the nights ended. I will tell you what began. The collection, not of bodies. Bodies argue with time. They insist on being remembered by smell and gravity. I dislike arguments. I kept one small truth from each person, an object that knew their heat and surrendered it, a ring loosened by thin fingers when a story ran out of future, a plastic button that flew once and decided the floor was enough, a locket with nothing inside, emptiness framed in gold, a bus card worn to a face by thumbs, a key whose door I never needed to find. I wrapped each in soft cloth, wrote a date in ink that does not fade, put it on a shelf at home. Home was nothing, a rented fade of a place, one room with a lamp that made evening even when it wasn't. The shelf was simple, spaces measured carefully, air between things, so they did not touch, so no one had to jostle for their last square of quiet. I did not label names. Names rot first. Dates keep shape. Sometimes I sat without the lamp, let the dark say their outlines, let the shelf breathe. People imagine killing is heat. It isn't. It's temperature leaving a room. The van cooled fast. So did I. Routine is a coat you can wear into any weather. Mine fit perfectly. Gas at the same station. Always cash. Always a nod. Mechanic who liked the van because it was simple, who replaced the brake light without being asked, and said I took care of my things. I did. Tires, fluids, belts. A quiet machine needs attention. I kept it honest. No rattle, no tell. The nights kept their appointments. So did I. Sometimes the city offered me someone long before I was ready. A woman staring at a cracked phone on a corner where taxis forget to look. A man with a backpack and a limp counting coins he already counted. A student who had learned how to walk fast but not how to see. I did not take them then. Hunger is impatient. Patience survives. I returned later, when their pattern had ripened, when the weather made choices for them, when the bus was late enough to become a prayer. The act never improved. It never needed to. It stayed steady. Hands where they belonged, voice even. Van moving like a sentence with no comma. I listened to the sounds inside them. The first sharp breath when the latch slid. The small, high syllable air makes when it finds it has nowhere to go. The way a heartbeat changes direction as if it could run without legs. I did not savor. Savoring is for men who want to feel. I wanted outcome. When quiet came, it was not triumph. It was proof. I cleaned, gloves, towels, wipes with no scent. I kept the heater running until the glass forgot us. I drove where cameras are too bored to watch, where dumpsters turn their backs, where trucks hiss at dawn like snakes waking up. Then home, lamp, cloth, ink, shelf, a ring set down with a click like a period, a button that decided never to be sewn again, a card that knew the route better than I ever would, a key that kept its door secret because it understood loyalty. They came for me on a Tuesday wearing the rain like uniforms. The van looked wounded under their lights, as if it had betrayed me. It hadn't. It had carried me exactly as far as I drove it. They opened the sliding door. They expected the past to pour out. The past had already dried. They searched the house. They always do. The shelf didn't hide. Shelves don't know how. They were angrier at the neatness than at the deaths. Order frightens people. It says someone made decisions and never apologized. "What is this?" one asked, holding the locket like a question with hinges. "A record," I said. He wanted a confession with edges. I gave him a room with air. They packed the objects in paper that sounded like leaves admitting defeat. They smudged the dates with their thumbs, left prints in my careful ink. They called it closure. I called it noise. Now the van is gone, and so are the streets I taught myself to read. A window replaces both. It makes the yard flat. Nothing moves in here unless I let it. I think about the sliding door, how softly it answered, how many times a simple mechanism agreed with me. I think about the shelf. There was one space left, 2 palms wide. I had already chosen what belonged there, not another object. Emptiness, labeled properly. I am not sorry. Sorry is a performance you put on for other people's comfort. I am finished performing. I kept what they left behind. Small truths that do not argue. Dates that do not rot. A van that never learned to scream. This is what I did. I learned the city's softest places. I made rooms inside rooms. A cab where weather could not touch us. A minute where decisions stopped breathing. A shelf where the last of someone could stand without falling. I stopped offering rides when I learned doors say yes without words. And once a door says yes, it doesn't know how to take it back. They say hotels forget people, that rooms are wiped clean, that nothing lingers once the sheets are changed. They're wrong. I worked nights, maintenance, check-ins, the kind of job built for a man who prefers quiet. The sign said, "Welcome," but no one ever meant it. Room 213 was mine, not to stay in, to prepare. Every floor had its secret. That one was mine. The key never went missing. I made a copy long before anyone thought to ask why. I told them it was easier that way, for emergencies. They nodded. No one questions a man who fixes things. That room waited for the right kind of guest, the alone kind. Business travelers, people with suitcases full of paper instead of clothes, people whose phones never rang. They arrive tired. You can smell exhaustion. It's metallic, like coins left in a closed hand. I'd greet them, a smile rehearsed and harmless. Offer to carry a bag, point out the elevator that groaned halfway up. A warning and a promise in one breath. I like to give them 213. "Quiet room," I said. It faces the back lot. No traffic noise. They always thanked me. The back lot was important. No windows looked that way, just the old fence and the burned out sign. I never watched them check in. I waited for the lamp behind their curtains to turn on, for the sound of running water, for the small cough that says someone believes they're alone. Then I used the other key. Hotels have rhythms. Doors sigh. Ice machines hum like tired hearts. Televisions murmur prayers for insomniacs. If you move when the hum rises, no one hears your footsteps. I entered as I always did, soft, measured, the way you enter a church when you still remember fear. They noticed eventually, always differently. Some froze, some spoke my name though I never gave it. Some looked to the phone as if it could save them. I liked the first few seconds best, the air between realization and noise. It's pure then, clean, a blank page before the ink spills. I never hurt them quickly. Quick is mercy, and mercy doesn't belong in rooms like mine. I made them sit, talk. People will tell you everything if you sound interested. They told me about families, promotions, small failures. They thought no one noticed. I listened. Listening makes people gentle. They confuse attention with safety. When their stories ran out, I let the silence arrive. Silence always does the rest. I will not say how long it took. Time loses its shape in there. Sometimes the television was still playing, a laugh track out of rhythm with the way breath stumbles near the end. When stillness came, I cleaned. Hotels teach you to erase, change the sheets, empty the trash, flush what doesn't belong. I was good at erasing. That's why no one noticed. The bodies? You imagine secrets too large. I didn't need to hide them far. The service elevator opens to a basement that smells of bleach and wet concrete. Laundry carts are deep. Plastic liners don't leak if you double them. By sunrise, 213 was ready again. Bed smooth, curtains drawn, a new bar of soap on the sink. Housekeeping loves a room already clean. I kept something each time. Not a limb, not a trophy you could name. Something that had touched them recently. A watch, an earring, a pen half chewed. Small, pocket-sized proofs that they had been real. I stored them in the locker behind the boiler. Heat keeps secrets well. It softens memory until it forgets shape. There are 23 items there, wrapped in hotel napkins, each with a room number and a date. I stopped after 23 because the pattern felt complete. Patterns matter. They never caught me. They caught time instead. It wore them down, and the hotel changed owners. The new sign was brighter, the fence repainted, the rooms renumbered. But 213 stayed. They kept it in the new plan, same walls, same view of nothing. The carpet changed color, but the floor remembered. Sometimes I walk past at night. The staff don't know me now. I look like someone who used to stay there too often and got nostalgic. Through the window I see the same lamp, its shade tilted the same way. Someone new lies in the bed, breathing the same recycled air, trusting the same lock. I could go back. I still have the key. It sleeps in my pocket, cool against the skin, a small heartbeat waiting for a palm. I turn it over with my thumb, feel the grooves, the bite marks where metal meets metal. Keys are promises. They always open something. I tell myself I'm done, that rooms deserve rest, that ghosts should not be made just to prove the dark is real. But sometimes, when rain paints the lot black, when the sign flickers and the hum of the ice machine finds that old rhythm, I feel the door breathing again, and I know that 213 still remembers me. It's strange, the things a building can hold after the guests are gone. You think it's dust? It's not. It's memory, pressed into paint, waiting for footsteps that sound like mine. They called me a monster. I prefer technician. Monsters are careless. I was precise. I never liked noise, not the kind people make. Laughter, arguments, coughing in waiting rooms, all of it clutter around the truth of things. Silence is clean. It lets you hear what matters, a heartbeat, the slide of breath between ribs, the pause before fear becomes sound. That's why I began to study the pause, to see what lies between words and screams. I wasn't a doctor, not by license, but I knew enough anatomy to make silence permanent. I practiced first on what was already quiet, birds that hit windows, cats from the alley behind the clinic, small rehearsals for steadiness. The smell of disinfectant stayed in my hands even after washing. I liked that. It meant readiness. When people asked what I did, I said I fixed things that were broken. It was true. They just never asked what kind of things. The first person was an accident. At least that's what I told myself. A patient who wouldn't stop talking, her panic turning every sound into a needle. She grabbed my wrist when I reached for the syringe. Fear makes people strong in short bursts. My other hand acted before I thought. Pressure, then stillness. A single exhale that didn't return. It was quiet again, utterly, perfectly, like the moment between thunder and rain. I stood there listening to the new silence she'd made, and something in me unfolded. A recognition. I cleaned everything, of course. Bleach, gloves. I returned order to the room. When I was done, it looked untouched, as if silence had always lived there. After that, I chased the same calm, not excitement, not bloodlust, the stillness. I wanted to see if it sounded the same in every throat. It didn't. Each silence had a different pitch. Some were low, steady, resigned. Others carried a faint tremor, like a wire after being plucked. I began keeping notes. Dates, locations, small details. Nothing incriminating, just measurements. How long the noise lasted, how quickly quiet arrived, how the body adjusted once words were no longer required. I used to think people die in chaos. They don't. The body organizes itself at the end. Breath becomes pattern. Eyes follow invisible coordinates. Then everything stops, like a clock that's decided it's told enough time. I preferred small rooms, basements, storage spaces, places where air doesn't echo. Echoes distort truth. I wore clean clothes, always gloves, always cover the mouth after. It helps keep the shape. I never shouted. Shouting feeds fear, and fear muddies the data. Some of them spoke softly near the end. Names, prayers, apologies. I recorded them mentally, curious how language clings, even when breath refuses. I didn't take trophies. That's for amateurs. I took notes. I memorized. Memory is more reliable than keepsakes. But sometimes, something small remained in my pocket. A cuff button, a broken clasp, a folded note that had been clutched too tight. Accidents of attention. I kept them in a drawer under surgical tape. Organization comforts me. I remember one in particular, a man with a deep voice and calm eyes. He kept asking why. I told him the truth. I'm studying silence. He thought it was metaphor. He laughed until I showed him how literal it could be. He lasted longer than most. His quiet had a hum to it, like air before a storm. When it ended, the room felt lighter, as if noise were a weight I had lifted. People think killing is power. It isn't. It's clarity. You see the human form stripped of performance. No excuses. No words to hide behind. Just the raw mechanism that once carried meaning. I cleaned meticulously, always left a window cracked open, a superstition maybe, to let the last of their breath escape. Air deserves to keep moving. The news called them disappearances. That word amused me. Nothing disappears. Matter changes state. Sound changes ownership. The quiet just moved in with me. Eventually, patterns draw attention. Police followed the trail of missing people to a name that sounded too neat. They came to the clinic, asked questions in careful tones, afraid to sound accusing. I answered honestly. I fixed things that are broken. They smiled, uncertain, because honesty spoken calmly feels like permission to leave. They did, for a while. But order collapses if you let routine slip. One night, I left notes on the desk. Open, unfinished. A janitor read more than he should. Curiosity is the most dangerous noise of all. I didn't resist arrest. Resisting is messy. They cuffed me gently, almost respectfully. I think they were afraid to raise their voices. Now the walls here listen better than any patient ever did. No windows, just the hum of the lights overhead, steady as pulse. I still take notes. On paper they give me for therapy. They expect remorse. They receive documentation. Silence behaves differently here. It's thicker, shared by hundreds who pretend they don't deserve it. Every night, when the others finally stop talking, I close my eyes and measure the quiet. It's never as pure as it was out there. Too many memories trapped in concrete. But sometimes, when the air shifts just right, I hear it again. The perfect frequency. The moment between fear and nothing. That's the sound I was chasing. That's the lesson no one understood. Silence is not absence. It's completion. And somewhere beyond these walls, there are rooms still waiting to be fixed. Places too loud, too full of unfinished breaths. They'll call it madness, obsession, evil. But I know the truth. I was only ever a man who wanted to listen until the world finally stopped talking. They say breathing is easy. It isn't. It's a thread that can fray if pulled the wrong way. I learned that early, on the farm, where ropes were everywhere and silence came in lengths. I was never cruel to the animals. Cruelty is noise. Control is quiet. If you tie something right, it doesn't struggle. It accepts its place. That's what I wanted to understand. How to make people still. I was a landscaper. Lawns, hedges, fences, patterns made of patience. People trusted me because I made their gardens look alive. No one imagines the man trimming their roses is studying how vines hold when they climb. I always carried rope, coils in the truck bed, knotted from habit. You can tell a man's mind by the knots he prefers. A square knot for order, a clove hitch for control, a slip knot for mercy. I never used mercy. I began small. Neighbors asked for help moving furniture. I tied things down carefully, watched how they stayed. People thanked me for being so precise. Precision is just another word for patience. The first real time, the time that counted, was an accident, or at least that's what I said. A woman whose yard I tended. She was kind, too kind, talked too much, stood too close. Loneliness makes people careless. It was evening. She offered lemonade. The air smelled of wet soil. She wanted to see the knots I used to secure her trellis. I showed her. Her fingers traced the rope like a question. I answered. It didn't take long. Rope knows what to do if your hands are sure. Her voice caught halfway through a word. Breath tried to finish the sentence, but couldn't. When the silence came, it wasn't peace. It was balance. I left her there a moment, like a sculpture made of air and regret. Then I untied what I could. The rest stayed. Knots remember their purpose. After that, I studied. Every job was a lesson. How to bind without bruising. How to keep breath steady until it isn't. I learned the rhythm of panic, how it rises, plateaus, and then disappears. Breath is the most obedient thing in the world once you teach it who's in charge. I didn't keep souvenirs. Objects don't matter. I kept notes, lengths of rope, materials, timing. Flax holds differently than nylon. Nylon sings when it slides. Flax whispers. Whispers are kinder. There were others, all alone, all polite. I didn't hunt them, they found me. People always need help with something heavy. Sometimes I used excuses, to fix a gate, to tie down a tarp before the storm. They'd hand me the rope, trust already looped around their wrists. It wasn't about pain. Pain distracts. It was about the moment when the body realizes movement is finished. When fingers curl inward, when the chest forgets its order to rise. That's the stillness I sought. The perfect knot. Not tight, not cruel, exact. After each one, I cleaned the rope, washed the fibers until they forgot. I hung them in the shed, each coil in its place, each loop labeled by date. It looked like any craftsman's wall, just rope. Only I knew which lines had held the truth of someone's last breath. Police say evidence always talks. Mine didn't. Rope doesn't betray its maker. It just waits to be used again. I worked for years. Seasons changed. Grass died and returned. People moved away, and the shed filled slowly. Rows of stillness, silent and obedient. One summer, I made a mistake. Routine breeds confidence, and confidence loosens caution. A man from the hardware store stopped by, saw the ropes drying in neat rows, laughed, called me the knot maker. I laughed too. It fit. The name stayed. Names have weight. They tether you. When they arrested me months later, that's what they wrote on the report. The knot maker. They thought it sounded poetic. They had no idea. Now, in this place, they've taken the ropes, but they haven't taken what I learned. Every night I close my eyes and feel the motion in memory. Loop, pull, tighten, release. The rhythm returns, steady as prayer. I can hear the others breathing through the vents. They think the walls keep them safe. Walls are only wider ropes. They hold the world in place. Sometimes I tie threads from my blanket. Tiny lessons, nothing harmful. Practice, control. They can take the rope from me, but not the need for order. You can't arrest a habit. You can only keep it waiting. They ask if I regret it. Regret is just another knot. It binds you to the past. I prefer clean lines. No loops left hanging. People think death is chaos, that the last seconds are wild. They're wrong. Death is discipline. It obeys. You just have to show it how. When I close my hands, I still feel the fibers slide, warm from friction, alive for one last moment. The rope learns the shape of what it holds. It never forgets. Sometimes, when the guards pass by, I imagine tying the night itself, making it still, making it mine. Not out of hate, out of habit. I think about the shed, empty now, the rope's gone. I wonder if the air remembers the patterns they left behind. Air keeps secrets better than wood. If they ever let me outside again, I will start smaller. A single knot, a single test. A reminder that control is simple. You just need something that wants to stay and something that knows how to hold. They say breathing is easy. It isn't. It's a thread. And I was the man who learned how to pull it until the world went still. They never slept well. Not before me. Not before the songs. Children cry because the world is too loud. I was just teaching them how to make it quiet. That's all I ever wanted. Quiet dreams, steady breathing. No more fear when the lights go out. I used to work at the hospital, night shift in the children's ward. The hallways smelled of plastic and lemon cleaner, machines whispering their endless beeps, nurses humming to stay awake. I learned their rhythms, how every monitor has its own heartbeat. The parents came and went, their faces all the same shape of worry. They tried to smile, but smiles never reach the eyes when you know how fragile things are. They left before midnight, always promising to come back early. The children stayed, and the nights grew long. I wasn't supposed to sing. Rules said music could overstimulate them, but rules never hear crying through a closed door. So I sang, softly at first. Old songs I didn't even know I remembered. Songs my mother used to hum when the storm shook the windows. It worked. The crying stopped. The machines even seemed to slow down, their beeping sinking to the melody. The nurses said I had a gift. They were right, just not in the way they thought. You see, children are closer to dreams than we are. They live half in the world, half in the dark, beyond it. And when you sing the right way, not loud, not soft, but honest, they follow the sound, they drift, they go where the song goes. The first time it happened, I didn't understand. The little boy had been fighting sleep for hours, coughing, crying, asking for his mother. I sang to him until his breath evened out. The machine beside his bed stopped beeping. I thought it had broken. It hadn't. He was finally quiet. perfectly, beautifully quiet. There was a peace in that room that I had never felt before, like the air had been holding its breath for too long and could finally rest. After the doctors came, after the rushing and the shouting, after the mother's voice cracked the silence open again, I sat in the hallway and realized what the song had done. I wasn't afraid. I was proud. The lullaby worked. The next night, I sang again. Different room, different melody, same ending. Some nights, I'd hum to all of them at once, the whole corridor breathing slower, every machine falling into rhythm. It was like conducting an orchestra made of sighs. The nurses started asking for me on double shifts. They said the kids slept better when I was around. They never checked the charts closely. Numbers blur after midnight. I began writing the lullabies down. Not lyrics, just patterns. A way to remember which notes led to which kind of sleep. I filled notebooks with them. Lines of humming captured in ink. Each song had a name. The quiet window, the deep blanket, the gentle breath. When they finally noticed the pattern of deaths, they blamed the medicine. Doses too high, machines malfunctioning. They changed equipment, brought in specialists. No one thought to silence the singing. The night they suspended me, I didn't argue. I packed my notebooks, my name tag, my tapes of soft humming. They called it an investigation. I called it intermission. I kept singing, not in hospitals now, in homes. People always need caretakers, nannies, night nurses. They open their doors to kindness. They never imagine the melody that follows them inside. Some fought the sleep longer than others. Children do that. They sense when something final hides behind comfort. But the song always wins. Music reaches places words can't. I never needed tools, never force. Just breath, just patience, just sound. Their last exhale always matched the key of my song. A perfect note, no tremble, no pain. I couldn't let them wake again after that. It would have ruined the harmony. I kept something small from each, not to remember, but to tune. A hair ribbon, a paper drawing, a button from a pajama sleeve. Objects that still knew how to dream. I kept them in a wooden box under my bed, lined with soft fabric. When I lifted the lid, the air smelled faintly of lavender and dust, like bedtime. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I open it and hum to them again. The sound fills the room, warm, heavy. For a moment, I feel surrounded, as if tiny voices hum back, half asleep, half somewhere else. People say children forget easily. They're wrong. They remember songs. Songs never die. They just change rooms. The police came eventually. Neighbors complained about music at night, said it made them feel dizzy, made their babies restless. They found me sitting by the window, rocking slowly, singing to no one they could see. They asked where the children were. I told them they were sleeping. They didn't believe me, but I was telling the truth. They took the box. They called the objects evidence. They played the tapes I'd made, and every officer who heard them grew pale halfway through. They said the songs made them cold. They turned them off before the last note. No one ever listens all the way to the end. That's where the peace lives. Now I sit in a room with no windows, no lullabies allowed. But at night, I can still hear the echo of their breathing, soft and even, just as I left it. And when I close my eyes, I hum, quietly, to the air, to the walls, to the emptiness that still answers back. They never slept well before me. Now they do. And one day, when this place finally falls silent, I'll sing again and teach the world how to rest. People think disappearance is chaos. It isn't. It's geometry. Every life has angles, patterns, places where shadows overlap, just enough for a person to step through. I learned to find those overlaps. That's all I ever did. Remove people from equations that didn't need them. It started as work. Private investigations, lost persons, runaways, husbands who never came home. I was good at finding them. So good that one day I wondered what it would feel like to make someone unfindable. The first time wasn't planned. A woman hired me to track her brother. I found him in a motel outside the city, alone, desperate, waiting for someone to decide his fate. I looked at him through the cracked door, and something clicked. He could vanish, and the world would keep breathing. I realized disappearance is mercy if you do it right. So I learned the art of removal. Every person leaves trails, digital, physical, emotional. The trick is to erase each in the correct order. Never all at once. Sudden absence draws attention. Gradual fading looks like choice. Step 1. Routine. You become part of it. The same face at the cafe, the same nod in the hallway, the same harmless hello. You build predictability until they stop seeing you. That's when you're safest. When you're familiar enough to disappear with them. Step 2. Mapping. You learn their routes, their habits, their silences. Where they hesitate crossing the street, which days they forget umbrellas, how long it takes them to check their phone after a message doesn't come. Step 3. Isolation. Never physical first. Social. You make the world forget them before their body does. You delete small pieces, an email, a contact, a favor unreturned. They shrink in their own lives until even they begin to feel invisible. By the time I act, they're already half gone. No noise, no struggle, just absence, completing itself. I never kept souvenirs. That's for collectors. I kept coordinates, dates, records of where silence began, paper trails that ended mid-sentence. It felt like writing endings the world forgot to finish. Some were easy. People who lived too fast to be noticed missing. Some took patience. The ones with families, friends who actually asked questions. But everyone forgets eventually. Memory is obedient if you feed it enough explanations. I built an archive, not of people, but of vanishing points. Each file marked by a single line, no longer there. Sometimes I'd read them at night, imagine the spaces they left behind, the quiet apartments, the empty chairs, the dinners served for one. Absence is the purest architecture. You can walk through it without leaving prints. You want to know how I made them disappear. But that's not the story. The story is why no one ever came looking hard enough. People like the idea of closure, not the work of it. They want bodies, not mysteries. Mysteries linger. They remind you the world doesn't need permission to erase you. I gave the world a helping hand. They never suffered, at least not in ways that matter. Fear was brief, a spark swallowed by dark water, then nothing, a clean slate. I envied them sometimes. The police called me methodical. The papers called me invisible. They're both right. I lived between coordinates, moving only when the pattern demanded. Each disappearance had to balance the last, an equation of absence. When they finally traced one of the trails back to me, they didn't find victims, only silence. No evidence, no remains, just rooms scrubbed of memory, photos turned to static, records rewritten. They arrested a ghost and didn't even notice. Now they keep me in a box with white walls and fluorescent hum. They think the vanishing is over. It isn't. It just changed shape. You see, vanishing isn't about bodies. It's about attention, where people choose to look. If no one looks, you're gone. Most of the guards don't meet my eyes anymore. They say it's easier that way. That's how it begins. A skipped conversation, a forgotten meal, a name misplaced on a clipboard, a person dissolving one detail at a time. I watch it happen to them, slowly, beautifully. Maybe that's the real gift, not erasing others, but teaching the world how to erase itself, one silence at a time, one empty chair, one missing heartbeat folded neatly into the routine of another morning. People think disappearance is chaos. It isn't. It's geometry. And I was the one who learned how to draw the lines. I don't keep secrets. I file them. Order calms the world. Noise becomes pattern. Fear becomes data. That's why I started the archive. It began with a question. How long does fear last after the source is gone? Does it fade or does it ferment? I wanted proof, not guesses, not metaphors. Numbers, records, evidence. I was an analyst once. Insurance claims, spreadsheets, reports, people reduced to columns and losses. I liked the precision. I liked how grief looked tidy in tables. After a while, I wondered what other emotions could be measured the same way. So I started collecting fear. The first subject came easily, a man who worked 3 cubicles away. He stayed late and always the last to leave, his desk a forest of receipts and empty coffee cups. I knew his schedule, his shortcuts home, the stairwell he used to avoid the elevator. I followed, quietly. No need for violence. Fear grows better when it thinks it's alone. I logged every detail. The time he heard the footsteps, the moment his breath stuttered, the precise decibel of his final sound. I wrote it all down. Data demands accuracy. That was the beginning. Each subject after that became a file, folder color-coded. Red for spontaneous panic, blue for denial, black for the ones who understood too late. Every case had a report, date, time, environment, reaction, resolution. I never called it murder. That's not a scientific term. I called it termination of variable. People misunderstand fear. They think it's chaos. It isn't. It follows formulas. It peaks when expectation and realization meet. You can predict it, even orchestrate it, like tuning an instrument. I tested different conditions: open spaces, closed rooms, light, dark, sound, silence. The results fascinated me. Claustrophobia produced faster escalation, but wide emptiness created longer sustain. Men broke faster when they thought they were being watched. Women broke slower, but deeper. Their silence carried longer. I began recording audio, then video. Angles mattered. You can't analyze what you can't see. Each setup took hours. Tripods, timestamps, backup drives, everything labeled, dated, cross-referenced. Fear deserved that respect. When a subject reached completion, I cleaned the space, filed the footage, and wrote my summary report. I always used the same closing line: the moment of silence has been achieved. People ask why I did it. Curiosity, mostly, but also purpose. Everyone collects something. Some people keep stamps. Others keep regrets. I kept fear because it was honest. No one fakes it well. My archive grew. Shelves of boxes, binders thick with observation, tapes labeled in my handwriting. I could walk through that room and know exactly where every heartbeat ended. Each file was a preserved moment, the sound of humanity stripped of pretense. It became routine, predictable, until I realized I was running out of patterns. Fear had become familiar. I wanted something rarer, a subject who wouldn't respond the way the others did. That's when I found her, a librarian. Irony isn't lost on me. She spent her life preserving stories. I was there to preserve hers. She wasn't like the others. When I followed her, she didn't panic. She noticed. She turned once, met my eyes, and smiled. A small, resigned smile, like someone recognizing a deadline. She didn't run. She asked me, "How will you remember me?" No one had asked that before. I told her the truth, in order. She laughed softly and said, "Then make sure the ending fits." I did, perfectly. That file stayed open longer than the rest. Not because I hesitated, but because her calm distorted the data. It wasn't fear, it was acceptance, and I didn't know how to categorize that. So I created a new folder, Type E, Equilibrium. After her, I stopped collecting for a while. The archive was complete in its symmetry. Hundreds of cases. A full taxonomy of terror. When they found the room, they didn't understand it. The police called it a shrine. The journalists called it madness. They didn't see the beauty. How every cable, every file, every numbered label fit together like vertebrae in a single spine. It wasn't chaos, it was anatomy. They catalogued my catalog, seized everything, turned my order into their evidence. They thought taking it would end the work. It didn't. The real archive isn't paper or tape. It's memory. Mine. Now I sit in a smaller room, bare walls, no shelves, no boxes. But I still file. I file the sounds of this place. The guard's shoes on tile, the scrape of the food tray, the click of the lock at night. Every noise has its folder in my head. Fear still lives here. It just changed subject. Sometimes I hear footsteps pause outside my door. Maybe curiosity, maybe caution. I listen to their breathing. I record it silently, mentally. Fear in containment behaves differently. It has rhythm, predictable, delicate rhythm. They think I'm finished. They're wrong. The work continues. It always will. Decay is the only honest thing in the world. Everything else lies. Smiles fade, promises rot. Beauty spoils the moment you name it. I was tired of watching things fall apart, so I learned how to stop them. At first, it was simple craft. Animals mostly. Foxes, birds, pets, whose owners wanted to pretend time had mercy. They called it taxidermy. I called it defiance. I worked carefully. Soft hands, clean tools, steady breath. Every stitch was a prayer to stillness. The trick is not to make them look alive. It's to make them forget they ever moved. People admired my work, said the eyes looked peaceful. Peaceful is just another word for permanent. But animals were never enough. Fur and feather lack the complexity of flesh, the warmth that resists until it doesn't. You can't preserve what you never loved. The first person came to me, not the other way around. A woman who brought me her cat. She stayed while I worked, talking about how silence fills a house. Her voice shook when she said the word gone. I remember thinking how unfair it was that something so delicate should tremble at all. When she reached out to touch the finished animal, her hand lingered. I wanted to stop that tremor too, to seal it, fix it in time, before the shaking spread. So I did. It wasn't difficult. Stillness already lived in her. I just helped it surface. The process was slower, more reverent. The body resists longer when it once held words. But patience is a craftsman's first tool. When it was done, I looked at her face and realized something profound. Death doesn't ruin beauty. It completes it. I prepared her carefully. The same precision, the same respect. Glass eyes matched to her photograph, skin treated until it remembered warmth, but not decay. I brushed her hair, tilted her head slightly, as if she were listening. She looked perfect, eternal, finally free from time. I kept her in the back room, where the lights stayed dim and forgiving. At night, I would sit with her, the air thick with the smell of varnish and lilac oil. She didn't speak, but her silence had weight. It filled the room better than conversation ever could. After her, I couldn't stop. Beauty dies too easily, and I had learned how to keep it breathing, at least in appearance. Each new subject was chosen with care, never random, never cruel. A musician whose hands shook too much to play, a dancer whose knees betrayed her, a child whose laughter had grown hoarse from sickness. I preserved them all. Their stillness was their peace. People began to whisper about disappearances, clients who came and never left. But art requires secrecy. You don't unveil perfection until it's ready. I built a gallery in my basement. Polished floors, soft light, the air dry enough to hold forever. Each figure had its own pedestal, each name engraved in brass beneath glass domes. Not memorials, continuations. When I opened the door, it was like stepping into eternity. Faces poised mid-thought, hands resting on invisible instruments, eyes gently lifted toward a light that never changed. I walked among them, checking seams, dusting hair, keeping time from touching them again. I didn't see bodies. I saw victory, overwrought, over forgetting, over death. The newspapers called me the preserver after they found the gallery. They said it with disgust, as if saving beauty were a crime. The officers trembled when they entered. They said the air felt wrong, too still, too careful. One of them dropped his flashlight. The sound shattered the perfection. I hated him for that. They asked me why. Why the people? Why the care? Why the eyes open? I told them the truth. Because I love what time destroys. They didn't understand. They never do. They think love is motion. Love is preservation. To keep something safe, you have to stop it from changing. Now, they keep me here, in a cell with no gallery, no tools, no scent of lilac to hide the smell of decay. But I remember every detail, every name, every brushstroke of stillness I ever gave. Sometimes I imagine they're still there, standing in that quiet light, waiting for me to return and dust their cheeks. Perfection requires maintenance. Even eternity gathers dust. I can hear them sometimes, not speaking, not moving, just existing in their silence. A hum below the hum, like varnish settling. They call it madness. They're wrong. Madness is when you forget what matters. I remember everything. And when the lights go out here, I see them again. All those perfect forms, their eyes calm, their lips half curved into sleep. They never aged. They never left. They never betrayed their beauty. Time bends for those who love correctly. I proved it. Decay is the only honest thing in the world, and I was the only man honest enough to stop it.